Summer in Gulshan Colony pressed humid fingers against every wall. But inside the hack house, the air was worst-dight with the silence of too many swallowed resentments. Javed sat at the breakfast table, rereading the scholarship letter he had. Circled in red ink, across from him, 17-year-old Nora fiddled with her dead Walkman. Headphones dangling. "Your admission form is half blank," he said, not looking up. "Deadlines don't move." Nora's laugh was scorched. "Deadlines don't feed dreams. Neither does Delhi University. That degree is your passport. Music gigs in Smoky Calf S are not." She rose, chair scraping tiles. "You fear cafes. Because they sell ideas louder than your radio. I fear regret. Your regret, not mine." She folded the form, stuffed it into her denim pocket, and headed for the door. Thunder rumbled behind dull clouds, promising rain. From the hallway, Sarah called, "Breakfast is getting cold." No answer. A spoon clinked. The family's last normal sound. Javed followed Nora onto the veranda. Dust swirled where jasmine once bloomed. He remembered planting that bush the day she was born. Now her fists held keys, lip balm, an unfinished life. "At least tell me where you're going. Out. Where the air doesn't judge." She hit the screen door, metal frame rattling. For a heartbeat, he saw her profile chin high. Freckles half hidden under foundation, before she slammed the door so hard, the glass quivered. The echo crawled down the hall, knocking pictures askew. Silence reclaimed the house. Fan blades hummed like tired bees. A clock ticked from 9:07 to 9:08 an ordinary minute that would grow claws. Before the argument sparked, breakfast already hinted at combustion. Omelette, overfried tea forgotten on the stove, radio host debating scandals, every element a fuse. Nora arrived late, eyeliner smudged from a night riding music beneath a blanket with a torch. She hummed, half melody, half rebellion. Javed, correcting a typo on her application, felt the hum like static in his molars. "You stayed up again," he'd said. She met his eyes. "Songs don't check the clock. And fathers do." Silence wedged between them, alive and twitching that. Now, hours later, that silence had grown tentacles through every corner of the house. Ceiling paint peeled in curls. Refrigerator's buzz sounded accusing. Each mundane object seemed to ask the same question: where is she? While Sarah attempted to pray, her voice cracked on the opening verse of Surah Yasin. She abandoned the recitation, tears darkening her dupatta. Javed couldn't cry. Tears demanded acceptance. He tried the landline again, dialing numbers he already knew would fail Saminas. Nora's prepaid mobile, the bookstore, a cousin in Karachi. Pulse quickened with each unanswered ring, a metronome of dread. The dial. Tone fried the wires, each beep transmitting panic through copper veins. He paced the hallway, stepping over Nora's discarded guitar pick, and caught his reflection in the mirror, shirt wrinkled, eyes haunted. For the first time, he admitted the nightmare aloud, whispering, what if she never meant to come back? Lightning exposed the empty street like an X-ray, showing the bones of a neighborhood and the hollow where his daughter should be. Noon to dusk, stretched elastic. He phoned Nora's friend Samina. Voicemail. He drove to the bookstore where Nora played sets. The owner shrugged. Hospital registry. No matches. Each errand stitched heavier fear into his lungs. By sunset, clouds burst, rain hammered zinc rooftops. Streetlights flickered, turning droplets into neon beads. Javed stood at the gate, clothes soaking, scanning puddles for her reflection. Nothing. Mr. Farouk next door shouted over the downpour, everything okay? She'll be home soon, Javed lied. At 10 p.m. he dialed 15. A bored constable answered, my daughter left this morning, age 17. Probably a lover's spat. File, tomorrow. It's been 13 hours. Policy is 4, click. Midnight brought a power cut. Candlelight jittered across photographs. Nora, at 5 licking cake. At 10 with a science ribbon. At 15 hugging her first guitar. Still images argued with darkness. SAIA murmured. She hates the monsoon. She'll find shelter. Entered Nora's room. Lavender walls carried posters, Queen Nazia, Hassan, Pink Floyd. On the desk lay a cassette labeled New Songs. He pressed play. Static dot, a gust slammed the window. Rain sprayed his face. Under the pillow he found the scholarship letter. On its back she had penciled lyrics. Doors close so hearts can open. He folded the paper into his shirt pocket. The storm eased near 3 a.m. The road glistened under the street lamp, like wet steel. Dawn birds rehearsed, unsure if light would return. Javed brewed chai he couldn't drink. Steam coiled upward, vanishing like hope. He opened a fresh notebook. First entry, timeline since Nora walked out. He listed every detail: argument at 8:45, slam at 8:58, thunder at 9:15, rain at 6:40, police call at 10:07. Facts felt safer than feelings. A plan formed. At first light, he would drive to the station, demand a report, search Semina Street, the bus depot, the cafe, the riverbank. No stone unturned. Yet a colder voice whispered, "You're already too late." He ripped that thought aside like a rotting floorboard gap remaining. He vowed that dawn would bring answers. Outside, stray dogs howled, calling someone home. Their chorus faded as police sirens flared 2 blocks away, painting the damp walls blue and red. Javed slipped on his mud-soaked shoes. He stepped into the storm-damp night, into hours that had already begun counting every missing heartbeat. Dawn broke over Gulshan Colony like a bruise turning purple-green, the rain finally thinning to mist. Jave Tak, still in yesterday's shirt, walked straight from the veranda to his car. Sarah beside him, both too hollow for sleep. Nora had been gone 16 hours. At the police station, the foyer smelled of wet wool and stale cigarettes. A television replayed cricket highlights. No one watched. Javed approached the counter. "I need to report my daughter missing." The night constable didn't look up. 24 hours, sir. She left yesterday morning. Javed's voice cracked. That policy could kill her. A pause. Stamp. A blank form slid across. Fill what you can. Inspector Roth reviews at 6. Back outside, calls to Semina, the hospital. The music cafe yielded nothing but ringing tones and sympathetic regrets. The city shrugged past them. Fruit carts rattled, mosque loudspeakers sang Fawza, exhaust hung low. They drove street to street, fixing flyers to light. Poles already layered with tutoring ads and lost dog posters. Sarah clutched a photo of Nora in a sequined kurta. Dialogue shrank to function. Turn right, any call, nothing. Rainwater pooled amber under sodium lamps. Each puddle a mirror that refused to show their daughter. At 8 a.m. they reached Semina's house. Her mother's sorry was wrinkled, her worry older than the night. Semina hasn't heard from her, she insisted. Semina, eyes smudged, whispered, "If she calls, I'll tell you." A tremor in that whisper lodged in Javed's ribs. Hospitals next. No Jane Doe matched Nora's nose stud or faded henna bracelet. Javed gagged on vending machine coffee, murmuring, "Keep moving." Terrified stillness would petrify grief. Noon found them at the swollen riverbank. Mud sucked at their shoes. A patrolling constable said, "No bodies today, Alhamdulillah." The blessing tasted metallic. 6 p.m. back at the station. Inspector Roth, moustached like a checkmark, skimmed the form. Runaway until proven otherwise. Happens all the time. She stormed out with nothing but pocket money. Javed argued. "We'll circulate the notice." A rubber stamp thudded. Bureaucracy closing its fist. He left the station and drove straight to the central bus terminal. A brutalist slab of concrete soaked in diesel fumes. Inside, fluorescent lights flickered like cheap horror effects. Behind laborers clutching burlap sacks, mothers herding toddlers, a young couple trading earbud music across a single wire. When his turn came, the ticket clerk barely looked up from a tattered ledger. "I need departures for yesterday morning." Javed said, "Sir, thousands leave daily." This is her photo. He slid Nora's flyer across the scratched counter. The clerk studied it, eyes softening. "Pretty girl. Try window 7. They handle Lahore routes. At window 7, a woman with henned hands flipped through carbon copy manifests. No single girls traveling alone yesterday, she said at last. Groups of students, yes. Families, yes. No one matching. Javid pressed. Maybe she bought a ticket and never boarded. Unlikely. We check stubs. She offered a sympathetic tilt of the head, a gesture that felt like a door closing. He returned to the car. Exhaustion draped over him like a waterlogged blanket. Sarah handed him a thermos of tea she'd packed but forgotten. It tasted bitter. He drank anyway. They spent early evening trolling pawnshops. In one, a ceiling fan ticked like a metronome over tarnished toasters and rusted bicycles. A jeweler behind a glass case examined Nora's earring twinther, one still in Sarah's palm. Silver filigree, he said. Haven't seen its pair. If someone tries to sell it, call me, Javid pleaded, leaving a card he'd scrawled. Hastily, with shaking fingers, outside twilight-painted storefront shutters, lilac, another day sliding shut. A siren wailed somewhere distant. For a moment, Javid wondered if it was racing toward a miracle or just another routine call. Hope kept bending, never quite breaking. With every minute, it felt more like metal memory wire returning to shape whenever crushed. Night drew curtain. Even his eyes refused blessed sleep. In Nora's room, Sarah arranged stuffed animals on the bed, as though staging applause for her. Returned Javid picked up the cassette labeled New Songs. The ribbon inside had snapped. Something melodic, severed. Day 2, flyers multiplied like paper heartbeats. College friends canvassed bus stands. Imam Khalid walked alleys. Samina blasted pleas online. Comments, bread theories. Bus to Lahore, secret boyfriend, kidnapped. Javid logged each rumor into a spiral notebook. Facts, right, guesses left, arrows everywhere. Pattern, nowhere. That evening, TV anchor Sohail Aziz aired a 30-second segment. School photo of Nora. Caption, teen musician vanishes. What do you want to tell your daughter? He asked. Javid faced the camera. Come home. No questions, no anger. Just come home. Commercial break followed. His world stayed paused. Day 3 brought a softer rain, as if the sky had learned manners. Javid returned to the station, clutching a napkin. Cafe owner's note of a white Suzuki Alto Nora might have entered. Rough sighed, logged it, said, we'll check. Anger sparked, extinguished by fatigue. Late that night, the landline rang. Enlisted number. Static, then a single shaky breath, unmistakably female. Nora. Javid whispered. Silence, click. He wrote 3:33 a.m., unknown call. One breath beneath other fragmented clues. Before dawn, he stood in the garden. Jasmine's scent sharp as memory. A patrol car rolled up. 2 detectives emerged. One was the city's young star, Detective Aisha Connor's alert, stance military straight. Nora's flyer pinched between gloved fingers. Mr. Hack, she said, voice clipped yet respectful. Your daughter's case from 1986 intersects with another file I'm revisiting. I'm reopening it. Effective now. Hope flared, fragile but real, like a match struck in monsoon wind. Aisha's gaze swept the neighborhood shadows. First we reconstruct yesterday. Then we look 20 years back. The drizzle quickened, tapping the flyer like a metronome of resolve. Javid exhaled, realizing the search had just become an investigation with teeth, as first light bled across low clouds. He felt the notebook in his pocket, blank pages, eager, terrified, waiting for whatever truths Detective Khan might unearth. Next, waiting unblinking hope. The files were brittle with time, edges yellowed, ink faded, staples rusted like old blood. Detective Aisha Khan laid them out in her home office, a room half lit by the grey morning peeking through dusty blinds. She hadn't meant to start this early, but the case throbbed like a splinter under skin. One manila folder bore the scrawled name, Nora Hack missing. July 1986. Beneath it, photocopies of a teenage girl's smile, early statements full of holes, and timelines sketched on lined paper in someone else's anxious hand. The original officer's note read, probable runaway, domestic tension, No known threats. Aisha sighed. That's it. A girl vanishes, and they called it puberty. She flipped to the official logs. Javed's statement, taken 36 hours late. Samina's account clearly rehearsed. The constable. On record, Majid Sadekwi had underlined no foul play suspected. Her pen circled that name in red. Across town, Javed sat in his kitchen nursing a chipped mug of tea gone cold. The house was quieter than grief allowed, too heavy for sound. He hadn't slept. Instead, he stared at Nora's guitar, its strings collecting dust, one broken. Curling like a question mark, Sarah had retreated into rituals, prayers, cooking, cleaning things that didn't need cleaning. If I stay still, I'll drown, she whispered. On the kitchen counter lay a half-empty bottle of whiskey. Illegal in Pakistan, but permitted by grief. It was Javed's secret, one of many that would soon come clawing out. When Aisha arrived, she didn't knock like a stranger. She stepped in like someone who meant to find the ghosts, even if it meant inviting them to speak. Mr. Hack, she said, we need to walk backward, before we run forward. Tell me everything from the start, but only what you left out of the police file. Javed hesitated. I told them everything. You told them what you could survive, telling said. That's not the same. He poured tea, strong and bitter. The whiskey bottle glinted between them. I was strict, he confessed. Stricter than I had any right to be. I knew she was seeing someone who, I don't know, she wouldn't tell me, only that he was older, dangerous, maybe. She said, if you knew, you'd call the cops. Aisha scribbled. She said that. Javed nodded, her exact words. I thought she was being dramatic. She wasn't. In her office later that night, Aisha cross-referenced 1986 incident reports with known offenders. She pulled files on 5 disappearances of young women, in similar timeframes, most labeled as runaway, no follow-up. A pattern emerged. All lived within a 10-kilometer radius. All had minor conflicts with family. All vanished without a trace. She highlighted their names: Nora Hack, Farah Malik, Zoya Khan, Rashida Arif, Lubna Mahmood. Only Nora's case had been filed by a parent relentless enough to keep asking questions. Back in 1986, it was too easy to let girls go missing. Phones were landlines, surveillance was gossip. If a girl vanished, she was branded wild or in love labels that justified apathy. Aisha dug deeper into Constable Majid Sadekwi's service record. In 1986, he was 34, stationed in the same precinct, handling Nora's case. In 87, he abruptly requested a transfer granted within 24 hours. With no listed reason, she called in a favor. An old friend from archives delivered a faded photograph, Majid, in uniform. Arm draped around another officer, badge gleaming, grin, smug. The background barely visible showed the front porch of the Hack household. Why had he visited? Why hadn't Javed mentioned him that evening? Aisha returned to Javed's home. He answered the door slower this time, eyes rimmed with sleepless red. Did Constable Majid ever come to your home? Javed stared, storm clouds gathering behind his expression. Yes, he said, voice like sandpaper. He was assigned the case, came twice. Asked about her friends, then offered to pray with us. Even brought food once. Did Nora ever mention him by name? No, but I remember. The day he came, she refused to leave her room. Said she didn't want to be near him. Did you ask why? I assumed she hated cops. Aisha leaned forward. You don't think now that maybe he was the man she was afraid of? Hands clenched into the table. God help me. I don't know. Later that night, after she left, Javed rummaged through a drawer he hadn't opened in decades. Inside, a box of cassette tapes, a cloth bracelet, and a half-burned letter from Nora's diary. He unfolded the page. Lines scrawled in messy blue ink. Sometimes I feel like I'm dating a ghost. He's everywhere and nowhere. He knows how to be invisible. When he touches my shoulder, I freeze like prey. Javed read it twice, then set it down with shaking fingers. At 2 a.m., Isha poured herself a drink, black coffee, thick and bitter, and pinned the 6 girls' photos to a corkboard. Nora in the center, red string linking her to the others. Above it, she tacked a single word in block letters, dismissed. Outside her window, the city pulsed quietly, the kind of darkness that hid truths but also bred them. This case was never cold. She thought Tit had only been ignored, somewhere out there. The man who haunted Nora might still be alive, and Detective Aisha Khan had just decided she would become his ghost. In the basement of a dusty junk shop on Mall Road, time had forgotten everything except one song. The tin music box sat on the top shelf. Behind a cracked porcelain doll and a rusted compass, faded red paint still traced the edges. The ballerina no longer spun, but when twisted, the lid creaked open and played a few ghostly notes. The melody was off-key. Or maybe just old Javed, Hack hadn't come looking for the past. He had come looking for distraction. It was a Tuesday. In 2006, 20 years since Nora vanished, a colleague had suggested junking as a hobby for grieving minds. Buy old things, the man said. They tell stories no one else will. Javed never expected one of those stories to be his. The shop was run by a man named Bucket, who looked like he'd once been part of a traveling circus and had the debts to prove it. His beard was nicotine yellow, his glasses taped in the middle. Looking for anything in particular? He asked, voice gravel thick. Radios, Javed replied. Old ones, with character. Bucket gestured to the back. Characters in the dust. Javed drifted, half aimless. Then he saw it. The music box. He reached for it, heart beating like a low drum beat. The tune it played. It wasn't just a song. It was her song. Nora composed it, he murmured. As if afraid the air would argue, Bucket raised an eyebrow. That one's been sitting there for years. Came in a bag with some old cassettes and kids' junk, probably tossed out during a house move. Javed turned the box in his hands. Scratched initials on the bottom, NH, and then, a smeared all brown. Near the latch. Blood. His breath left him like it had somewhere else to go. Aisha Khan stared at the photograph Javed handed her. Nora, age 16, holding the music box on her birthday. There was no mistaking it. Same carvings, same chipped corner. She didn't ask permission. She took the box straight to the forensics lab. Blood. Dried, old, but real, type A positive. Same as Nora's, you're telling me, Aisha said, leaning against the lab wall, that a missing girl's blood-stained music box surfaced in a junk shop 20 years after her disappearance. And nobody noticed? The technician shrugged. Pakistan doesn't keep track of sentimental garbage. But this wasn't garbage. She had the shop raided. Bucket blinked into the sunlight like a lizard. I just bought a lot at an estate sale. Stuff from an old constable's bungalow. Place had mold and dead spiders. I didn't check for ghosts. Constable Aisha asked. Yeah, name was Odon M. Siddiqui, something like that. The name hit her like a sledgehammer. Constable Majid Siddiqui. Bucket handed her a faded invoice. Aisha photographed it, eyes narrowed. Back at HQ, she pulled Majid's service file. He'd retired in 2002, now ran a private security company, lived in a modest house outside the city. No wife, no kids, no pets, nothing anyone could use to tether him to the world. She needed a search warrant. But first, she needed cause. Something official, something concrete. So she went back to the box. Inside the velvet lining, a slit in the fabric, something thin inside paper. Carefully, she slid it out, a torn corner of a diary page. Words scrawled in familiar, jagged ink. He said if I told anyone, no one would believe me. Isha's hands tightened. This wasn't a case anymore. It was a countdown. Javed sat alone in Nora's room. He hadn't done that in years. It still looked like she might return any minute. The books, the Dreamcatcher, her posters of Nazia and Freddie Mercury, all untouched. But now, with the music box back in his hands, and that bloody smear staring at him like an accusation, it no longer felt like a shrine. It felt like evidence. He remembered something sudden and sharp. A day in 1986. 2 weeks before she disappeared. He'd come home early, heard shouting from her room, a man's voice. When he entered, no one was there. She said it was the radio. He believed her. He didn't want to believe anything else. Now, those 2 decades of silence between them roared in his ears. Aisha stood outside Majid Sadekwi's house the next morning, armed with 2 plainclothes officers and the quiet fury of a woman who refused to let girls be forgotten. She knocked. Majid answered. Older now, eyes dull, hair trimmed. With precision, yes. We're looking into a reopened cold case, she said smoothly. Would you mind answering a few questions? He didn't blink. Which one? Nora Hack. His left eye twitched just once. Aisha noticed. You were the reporting officer. Did you know her personally? No more than any other missing girl. Then explain why her bloodied music box was found in a junk shop. From your estate sale. His composure cracked like thin ice. I threw away a lot of things after I retired, he said slowly. I didn't inventory every box, but it wasn't yours to throw away. A silence stretched between them. Am I being accused of something? He asked. Not yet, Aisha said. But I'd advise you not to leave the city. As she walked away, Majid's door clicked shut behind her. She didn't need to see it, but she knew he locked it 3 times. That was enough. Something was waking that night. In her office, she pinned the photos of the music box beside the torn diary scrap and drew a red circle around them. Javed called her. His voice was frayed. She wrote songs on those diary pages, he said. She said they were her way of remembering things no one else wanted to hear. Aisha whispered back. She's finally being heard now. Outside, rain started again, soft, steady, and unforgiving. The silence of 2 decades had been broken, and somewhere deep in the city, someone who had counted on time to bury the past just realized it was digging it back up. The music box sat on Aisha Khan's desk, like a corpse waiting to speak. The blood test had confirmed what she suspected: it was Nora's type. But confirmation wasn't closure. It was a beginning. One soaked in the sound of gears that no longer spun, and lullabies that had stopped mid-note. She twisted the knob again. The song creaked out, slow and broken. DAA-DAA-DAA-DAA. Then a skip, then silence. Someone forced this open, the forensic tech had said earlier, then slammed it shut hard enough to break the ballerina inside. Aisha replayed that in her mind, picturing trembling hands, maybe Nora's, maybe his, maybe the moment just before blood-stained music. She knocked on Javed's door again that morning, and he opened it without asking who it was. His eyes were sunken. He hadn't slept. Again, I remembered something else, he said, leading her inside Nora. She'd been afraid to sleep in her own room. She said she kept hearing footsteps on the roof. Could it have been your house help, a neighbor? He shook his head. We didn't have a house help then, it was just us. I used to think it was her imagination. Hormonal nightmares, but now he stopped himself. Now it feels like guilt, dressed as memory. Aisha listened. That was her real job, listening between words. She used to hum that same tune before she slept, he added. She said it made her feel safe. She hummed it after the abuse, Aisha thought, but didn't say. Her eyes flicked to the music box again. That melody had become a crutch, and perhaps a timoth. Back at the station, Aisha reopened the original case statements. She fixated on one that had been barely acknowledged in 1986, Samina Khan. Nora's best friend. She'd given a short, panicked testimony, then full of contradictions. She said she'd meet someone, I think. No, she didn't tell me where. Thought she was with her cousins. But the line that had stuck with Aisha, now highlighted with a new urgency, was this: she told me. He knew where she lived. Aisha called Sumena. She answered after 5 rings, voice tight. I don't want to reopen this. It's already reopened. I have a family now, a daughter. What if he's still? Aisha's tone dropped. That's exactly why you should talk. Samina agreed to meet, reluctantly, in a quiet park outside town. She wore dark glasses despite the clouds. Her hands trembled as she held her phone like a shield. I never said everything, she confessed. voice barely audible over the rustling trees. Nora made me swear I wouldn't, to protect herself. No, to protect me, she said. If he knew I knew, he'd come after me too. Aisha didn't ask who he was. She waited. I saw him once, Samina whispered. They were arguing behind the auditorium. He was gripping her wrist. Hard. She was crying, but trying to act strong. Do you remember his face? I remember the uniform. Police khaki, gold ring. Scar above the eyebrow. Aisha's pulse jumped. Majid. Samina nodded, tears surfacing. He told her she was too loud. That people were asking questions. He said, keep singing, and I'll bury your voice so deep even the angels won't hear it. That evening, Aisha stared at Majid's file. Photo. A grainy, smiling man in uniform. Scar above left brow. A ring gleaming on the right hand. She whispered, you buried her voice in blood. Then she ran his phone records. In 2006, months before retiring, Majid had made over a dozen calls to a number registered to an address that no longer existed. A demolition site, an address, just 5 streets from the Hack household. She checked blueprints of that address on old rental Ranley, rarely inspected. A note caught her eye, underground cellar for water storage. Sealed in 1990, a chill walked up her spine. She drove to the address under moonlight, accompanied by 2 officers. The house was gone, reduced to foundation slabs and weeds, but the cellar entry was still visible, a crooked slab of concrete. They pried it open. Dust rose like smoke. Flashlights cut into the black. The stairs groaned. Walls were lined with stained insulation, and there, at the far end of the cellar, sat a child-sized chair bolted to the floor. A single silver earring rested in the dirt. One of the officers whispered a prayer. On the wall, scratched in jagged letters, was one word repeated 3 times. No. No, no side. Aisha crouched and stared at it. Not a decoration, not vandalism, a cry. Take photos. Bag the earring. Get forensics in here now. She stood, shaky but still. This is no longer a cold case. This is now a crime scene. Back at her desk, Aisha placed Nora's photograph. Beside the music box, the blood-stained diary scrap, and the new evidence log. The lullaby had been a warning. The silence hadn't been peace, it had been a prison. Now the song had changed, and Aisha was the one writing the next verse. The cellar findings cracked the case open like a long frozen joint, dislocated with one violent snap. The silver earring Nora's, the one kept in a drawer in Javed's house, long guarded like a relic of hope. The chair bolted to the floor. The scratches on the walls. The dried organic residue scraped from the concrete. None of it belonged in an abandoned storage pit, and now the air reeked of something far older than mold. It reeked of truth, crawling out from under 20 years of lies. Aisha Khan stared. At the evidence board, red thread connecting Nora's name to 5 others, Farah, Zoya, Rashida, Lubna, and a 6th folder still blank. Girls dismissed as rebellious. Girls with too much attitude. Girls whose files all carried one common inked signature. Constable Majid Siddiqui. In her hand was a photo of him taken just last week. Still neat, still upright, still pretending to be a citizen. She knew what she had to do next. Not arrest, not confront, not yet. She needed a fracture. A crack in his armor wide enough to pour gasoline into. So she returned to Samina Khan. This time, at her house, where her teenage daughter played guitar in the next room, strumming chords Nora once taught her when they were both 12. Your daughter ever hummed that lullaby? Aisha asked softly. Samina froze. Sometimes, she said. When she's nervous. I don't think she even knows where it came from. Aisha leaned forward. Did Nora ever mention blackmail? Yes, Samina whispered. She said he took photos. She caught him with a camera once. He told her if she left him, they'd end up on someone's doorstep. Did she ever say where those photos were? No. But she said if anything ever happened to her, I should go through her old lyric notebooks. The red one with the broken spine. Javed hadn't seen that notebook in years. It took him half a day to find it tucked behind old exam papers, school essays, a dried flower she once pressed inside a chemistry book. The notebook was cracked, flaking, but inside, Aisha found more than lyrics. Page after page had song titles crossed out. Others were laced with strange rhymes, lines that sounded like code. He sings with a gun in his throat. His badge hides more than dust. If I vanish, look where the pipes hum. Pipes, Aisha murmured. She meant the rental house. The one with the sealed cellar. The water system, more than rhymes. These were BREADCRUMBS. Then came the final page. One day someone will trace the thread. Until then, remember. His friend wears a badge too. Friend. Aisha read it again. His friend wears a badge too. This was no solo act. Nora had known all along. Majid wasn't working alone. She rechecked the original 1986 investigation roster. There it was, Officer Farouk Haq, the second officer, on duty the week. Nora disappeared, same surname, Javed's brother. The file had no mention of the familial connection. No disclosure. Just a signature. Aisha stared at the name like it had grown fangs. She drove straight to Javed's house. He answered the door faster than usual this time, like he'd been waiting. Did you know, she asked, straight to the point, that your brother Farouk was listed as the second responding officer in Nora's case? Javed paled. No, that can't be. He was posted in another district then. He wasn't, he was there, on duty, and he never declared the conflict of interest. He sat down slowly. The whiskey bottle on the shelf remained untouched. This time, I confronted him, Javed whispered. 2 months after Nora vanished. I asked him if he knew anything. He got defensive, said I was losing my mind. We stopped talking after that. Did he ever visit Nora? Javed hesitated. Once or twice. She was fond of him when she was little. But later, after her 16th birthday, she avoided him. She'll say. Why no, Javed said, now shaking. But she once said something odd. She said, Chachu looks at me like I'm not related. I thought she meant he was being critical. Aisha stood. Do you know where he is now? Javed's voice cracked. He died 4 years ago. Suicide. Hung himself in his garage. The next morning, Aisha stood in front of Farouk Haq's last known residence. It was padlocked, abandoned, its paint blistered, windows clouded with dust. A neighbor said it had been untouched since his death. Just the way the family wanted. She got a court order to enter. Inside. The air was sour. Old cigarette smoke and shame. A single photograph still hung on the wall. Farouk in uniform, standing beside Majid, both smiling, both alive, both hiding something. In the study, tucked behind accounting ledgers, she found a VHS tape inside a plain envelope, no label. She brought it back to the station. Inserted it into an old player at first, static. Then shaky footage. A girl's voice, Nora speaking directly to the camera. If you're watching this, I guess I'm already gone. He won't stop. Neither will the one who helps him. But I won't let them own the last piece of me, not my song. Then, the camera shifts, shows a man's hand reaching for her shoulder. She, FLINCHES. Tape cuts out. Aisha hit stop. Her hands trembled for the first time in years. Nora hadn't just left clues, she'd left a testimony. That night, Aisha visited Javed with the VHS in hand. They watched it together. He wept silently, tears seeping into clenched fists. She fought, he said finally. All the way to the end. She never stopped. Aisha agreed. Outside, thunder rumbled. The kind that didn't bring Rangest electricity, waiting to strike. The next chapter was no longer a search, it was a reckoning, because now, they didn't just have suspicion, they had a voice, and a name. The diary wasn't in Nora's room. It wasn't hidden in a box or tucked beneath her mattress. It was sealed in a wall, literally. A construction worker, renovating Javed's old storage room, had knocked through a hollow section of plaster, expecting shoddy masonry. Instead, he found something wrapped in plastic and duct tape, buried in the wall cavity like a secret someone never wanted found. When Javed saw the edge of the red leather binding, he staggered backward. I thought it was long gone, he whispered. The cover was warped with moisture and dust. Aisha peeled the tape carefully, gloves on. Pages clung together like scared children in the dark. Inside, the ink had bled. But Nora's handwriting lived. She had written the way only someone with no one to confide in would. Furious, poetic, coded, but raw. Painful truths threaded through metaphors, like barbed wire wrapped in lace. Day 73, he smells like cigarettes and aftershave. I know the pattern now. Tuesday nights, always Tuesdays. Day 90, he told me I owed him my silence. That he protected me from worse men. I think he believes that. Day 102, I recorded his voice on the Walkman. Hid the tape in the vent behind my poster. If he kills me, maybe someone will hear it. Day 130, he said. Farouk cleared things up for him. I asked what that meant. He just smiled and said, your family does more protecting than you. No. Day 141, the music box makes me feel safe. I wind it when I'm scared. It's the only thing that sings back. Aisha closed the diary slowly. The room seemed colder. She knew everything, she said. And she knew she wouldn't be believed. Javed's hands trembled as he flipped the page to day 147, the last dated entry. He said, next time I disobey, he won't be so gentle. Gentle, as if any of this is. I need to get away. I don't care how. Samina, said Lahore, maybe Karachi. I can't keep dying every Tuesday. If anyone finds this, tell Papa I did try to trust him. I just didn't think he'd believe me. I barely believe myself anymore. The silence that followed was unbearable. Javed broke it. She thought I wouldn't believe her. His voice cracked like old wood. She was right. Sarah, standing at the door, held her prayer beads so tightly, her fingers turned white. No, she said, tears sliding down her cheeks. You were just scared of what it would mean if you did. Back at the station, Aisha dug deeper. If there was a Walkman cassette hidden behind a poster vent, it could be anywhere. But then she remembered what Nora had written. The vent behind my poster. She called Javed again. Within the hour, they were both in Nora's old bedroom. Posters of Nasir Hassan, Queen, and a hauntingly ironic one of Dead Poets Society still hung like sentinels from another lifetime. Aisha walked to the wall beneath the air vent. The Queen poster hung unevenly, a corner sagging. She peeled it back. Behind it, a rusted metal air duct cover, missing a screw. Inside, a black and red Sony Walkman cassette tape, wrapped in plastic and labeled in smudged ink. Tuesday, they played it in the evidence lab. The audio was faint, muffled, like someone had recorded it from inside a drawer. But the voices were clear enough. Majid, Siddiqui, monotone, threatening. Mocking Majid. You think you're special because you can sing. I could silence you forever. If I wanted Nora, then why haven't you, Majid? Because you're mine. And because your precious uncle keeps telling me you're just confused. You think Farouk doesn't know about this. He's the reason nobody's investigating. Nora, you're lying. Majid, ask him yourself. Oh, wait, you're not allowed to talk about this, are you? He made sure of that. Click, that was it. But it was enough. Aisha called the District Intelligence Bureau. She didn't ask for backup. She demanded it. Majid Siddiqui was picked up outside his home the next morning. No drama. No resistance. Just the tired deflation of a man who had outlived his secrets and knew it. He was silent in interrogation for exactly 7 minutes. Then he asked for a glass of water. Then a cigarette. Then he talked. I didn't kill her, he said. I was just controlling her. She wanted to run away. I told her I'd ruin her if she did. Then one day she was gone. I never saw her again. I figured she'd gotten smart. Why the chair in the cellar? Aisha asked. To scare her? She never stayed in it long. I didn't. His words disintegrated into coughs. Lies hitting air too thick to hold them. Farouk helped you cover it up, she asked. Majid's silence was louder than a scream. I have the tape, she added. She names both of you. Majid dropped his cigarette, didn't bother picking it up. He looked up with dull eyes and said, "You think I was the only one?" Back at HQ, Aisha reviewed the confession. It wasn't enough for murder, but it was enough for coercion, sexual abuse, tampering with an investigation, and obstruction of justice. They would bury him under the law, if not the grave. And yet Nora's body was still missing that night. Aisha sat in her apartment, staring at the diary and the tape recorder. Her phone buzzed. It was Javed. One line, "I think I know where." She went. It was the same river Nora had once written songs about, where she and Sumina used to skip stones and whisper their futures into the wind like paper kites. Now, it flowed wide and brown beneath a slate sky, its current sluggish, as if weighed down by the memory of everything it had swallowed. Javed stood at the bank in silence, fingers clenching and unclenching as if gripping the past itself. Aisha stood beside him, her boots squelching in the damp mud. "She used to come here," he said. "When things got bad at home, when she needed to think." He paused, voice hollow. "I didn't realize until now how often thinking meant hiding." Aisha scanned the banks. The place was half overgrown, grasses tall, garbage tangled in roots. An old metal sign reading "No swimming, dangerous undercurrent." "I didn't bring you here for memory," Javed said, walking toward a cluster of trees. "I brought you here because of what she said in the diary. Where the pipes hum, that's not poetry, that's literal. It's this place." He pointed to a weathered concrete structure near the tree line. A rusted-out pump house that had once connected to the city's old drainage system, now disused, locked. "It's connected to the river," Javed said. "They sealed it off in the 90s, but back in the day, it was where stormwater and runoff went. The noise used to keep her awake at night when it rained. She hated the sound, called it the hum of drowned secrets." Aisha called in a team. Within an hour, city officials and forensics had cut the old padlock. The door screamed on its hinges as it opened. The air inside was wet and rotten, thick with mildew and rust. The flashlight beams cut through cobwebs, dancing across cracked tile, water-stained walls, and pipes that snaked along the ceiling like steel veins. And in the far corner, partially buried beneath collapsed concrete and rubble, something caught Aisha's eye, a small boot dot, tattered, faded. She stopped breathing. They cleared the debris slowly, hands shaking. What emerged was not a full skeleton, but fragments, ribs, part of a jaw, and a silver chain still hanging from what remained of a neck vertebrae. It had a pendant, a treble clef. Javed fell to his knees. He didn't wail, didn't shout. He just crumpled, like a man who had finally reached the bottom of a 20-year fall. Aisha knelt beside him, her voice low. "We'll get a DNA match." "But I already know." He nodded, face blank. "So do I." Later that night, forensic officers worked under floodlights. The evidence bags were filled with Nora's final belongings. The boot, the pendant, a strip of fabric that once may have been the lining of her music box. They also found a corroded, waterlogged, but intact. A forensic tech muttered, "If the film inside survived, that's a miracle." Aisha whispered back, "She deserves one." Back at headquarters, she opened her laptop, a new file, a new name added to the board in red ink, Nora Hack case. Closed official cause, homicide by asphyxiation. Body concealed, but this was more than a cold case reopened. This was a reckoning for every girl who had been laughed out of a police station, for every teenage diary that had been dismissed as drama, for every victim that had become a question mark with no answer. The next morning, Majid Sadeghi was formally charged with coercion of a minor, sexual abuse, obstruction of justice, concealment of a homicide. The court denied bail. His face, once smug, was pale now. His eyes avoided every lens. When asked if he had anything to say, he only muttered, "It wasn't supposed to go this far," but it had. The camera film miraculously yielded 3 photographs. One of Norris in front of the river, eyes defiant. One of the silver music box, opened, blood on the lid, and one blurry but unmistakably Vaman standing behind her. Majid. Aisha returned to Javed's home with a simple box sealed, stamped, respectful. Inside, Nora's pendant, the cassette, and a printed page of her final recovered lyrics. He opened it slowly. One hand gripped the table. He didn't cry this time. She came back, he whispered. She found her way back home. A public memorial was held by the river a week later. Dozens of women came. Some knew Nora, most didn't. But they stood shoulder to shoulder, candles in hand. As the song she once hummed from her music box played over a speaker system for the first time restored amplified, heard Samina spoke, so did Ayesha, and, finally, Javed. He didn't speak as a father asking for forgiveness. He spoke as a father who believed her now. A man who had made peace with guilt, not erased it. She was not weak, he said. She was warned to be silent. She chose music instead. The river lapped at the edge of the bank, slow and strange. Somewhere beneath its soil, the echoes still lived, but they weren't screams anymore. They were verses, they were resistance, they were a lullaby turned into truth. The courtroom buzzed like a nest of stirred hornets. Reporters filled the back rows, pens twitching, cameras clicking every time Majid Siddiqui so much as blinked. But he didn't blink often. He sat there, stiff, emotionless. His hair grayer now, his mouth a hard line like he was trying to vanish. Inside himself, and still, he never looked at Javed. Judge Rana Kamar presided with the weight of 2 decades behind her gavel. She'd seen killers, rapists, thieves, but this case crawled under her skin. Because this wasn't just a murder. This was a system that had swallowed a girl whole and called it paperwork. The prosecution opened with the cassette recording. Nora's voice, the real star witness, echoed through the courtroom like a ghost, demanding justice. As her trembling voice reached its peak, recounting the threats, the pain, the betrayal, people shifted in their seats. A few cried. Even the stenographer paused her typing. If I vanish, tell Papa I did try to trust him. Javed sat frozen, a statue sculpted from shame and love. Next to him, Ayesha Khan watched Majid with a predator's patience. His eyes flicked toward her only once. That was enough. She smiled. Samina took the stand next, older now, but stronger. She was trying to escape him, she said firmly. She told me she was scared all the time. That no one would believe her, because he wore a uniform and had friends in the department. Did she ever name the officer? The prosecutor asked. Yes, Majid Siddiqui. She said his name like it was poison in her mouth. The defense objected. The judge overruled, then came the forensic experts. They laid it all out. Nora's blood on the music box, her DNA on the chair in the cellar. The matching pendant, found with her remains, the recovered photos from the corroded camera, showing Majid with Nora near the pump house, the diary, the Walkman, tape. Each piece built a wall around Majid. A wall of facts that no lawyer could punch through with doubt. His defense strategy? Fabrication? She was troubled. Romanticizing trauma. The diary could have been written by anyone. But Nora's voice on the tape, the forensics, the blood, no lawyer, no matter how slick, could argue with bones in the dirt. On the 4th day, Javed took the stand. His face had aged 10 years in 10 weeks. His voice was raw, but steady. I failed her, he admitted. I saw the signs and called them rebellion. I confused her trauma with attitude. But my daughter was crying out, and I handed her silence. The courtroom held its breath. She didn't run away, he continued. She was hunted. And the man who did it sat across from our dinner table with a badge and a smile. He turned then, looked straight at Majid. You hurt my daughter, you buried her voice, but she made sure we'd still hear it. Majid finally blinked. By the 6th day, the trial wasn't just about Nora. New reports were coming in. Other women, other girls, some still missing, some found decades too late. 5 cold cases reopened within 72 hours of the media coverage. Each of them had Majid's name in the background interviews, search logs, dismissal signatures. He wasn't a fluke. He was a pattern. And the silence that protected him. It was built by men like Farouk Haq, Nora's uncle. Javed confirmed on the stand. Farouk convinced me she was imagining things. He told me to stop feeding her delusions. I believed him because I wanted to. Because believing her meant accepting she'd been broken under my roof. By the 8th day, the only person who hadn't spoken was Majid himself. He sat in the dock like a man embalmed in guilt and pride, but Judge Rana had seen his kind before. "Do you have anything to say?" she asked on the final day, her voice calm as a blade. Majid stood. "Slow, she wasn't supposed to die," he said. "I just wanted control. That's all, control." Then he laughed, a short, bitter sound. "But girls like her, they always fight, even when they're scared, especially when they sing." He sat down again. That was all he gave. But it was enough. The verdict came in after 2 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all charges. The court sentenced Majid Siddiqui to life imprisonment without parole, plus 30 years for obstruction and sexual abuse. The room didn't cheer. It didn't need to. It exhaled. Outside the courtroom, reporters surged. Microphones thrust toward Javed. He said nothing, but Samina did. She told the truth, she said, even when it cost her everything, and now the truth has spoken back. Aisha stayed quiet. She hated cameras. But in her pocket was the treble clef pendant, returned by forensics. She planned to give it back to Javed later, or maybe she'd toss it in the river. Let the water carry it where songs aren't lost. That night, she returned to her board, took down the string, removed the photos. The case was over. But something deeper had started. In a dusty radio studio, a local host replayed the restored version of Nora's last lullaby composed from her lyrics, her diary lines, and the music. Box tones. The song ended with a girl's voice humming softly. Unfinished, unbroken. Then the host said, "For every girl they tried to silence, this song is for you." The river no longer whispered secrets. It sang them. After the trial, the story of Nora Haque lit through the country like a match to dry paper. Her name trended for weeks. Not as a victim, but as a symbol of resistance, of buried truth clawing its way back up through decades of mud, silence, and shame. But this chapter wasn't about Majid Siddiqui anymore. It was about what came next. Javed Haque could no longer walk past a mirror without seeing both the man he wasn't, the one he failed to be. Yet in that reckoning, he found something strange, clarity. He no longer blamed himself only for believing the wrong people. He blamed himself for not listening to her. So, he did something that shocked even Aisha. He sold the house, donated the proceeds to a new shelter for abused girls. He named it Nora's Room. Every wall painted with music notes, every hallway lined with lyrics from her diary, every bedroom door, a small plaque, "Here, your voice matters." Samina Khan became its first volunteer counselor. "I kept my mouth shut too long," she told the first group of girls. "But silence is a disease. You can heal from it, but only by naming what hurt you." One girl raised her hand. "What if they don't believe us?" Samina's eyes flicked to the pendant around her neck, the one Jav gave her. Nora's treble clef. "Then we keep speaking until someone does." That's what Nora taught me. Aisha Khan never liked the word closure. It sounded like paperwork, like filing someone's pain into a cabinet. Instead, she preferred continuation, and hers continued every morning with the cold cases now reopened thanks to the trial. 5 more girls. 5 more stories never fully told, some with endings, others still trapped in limbo, but none forgotten anymore. One file in particular stood out. Zoya Rahman, vanished 1989, interviewed once by Farouk Haque, dismissed, never seen again. She pinned Zoya's photo on a new board beside Nora's, connected it with red thread, not to mourn, to fight. 3 months after the verdict, Nora's voice was added to a school curriculum under a unit titled Voices They Tried to Erase. Her lyrics were studied like literature, her case like a revolution. Students whispered her name, not with pity, but pride. Meanwhile, Majid Siddiqui sat in solitary confinement. Prison didn't break him. It erased him. No visitors, no letters, no obituary. When, 2 years later, he collapsed during morning roll call and died of a brain hemorrhage, his last words were reportedly mumbled. Not recorded, but one guard claimed he heard this. She kept singing. On the anniversary of the trial, a music festival was held by the river. They called it The Lullaby Lives. No big sponsors, no brands, just voices. Women, girls, survivors, reading, singing, dancing, barefoot in the mud, Nora once feared on, then used to hide the last of her pain. Javed stood at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed, watching them all. He wasn't her protector now, he was her witness. That night, Aisha sat by the river with Samina. Both had wine, both had ghosts. "Think she forgives us?" Samina asked. Aisha took her time answering. "No," she finally said. "I think she doesn't need to, because we weren't meant to be forgiven, we were meant to be changed." And the river remembered that the trees swayed, the earth stayed quiet, but the air hummed, just faintly, just softly, like a girl winding a music box with one final breath, and the music it played on. They used to say songs were just expressions, emotions, art, not admissible in court, not cold, hard evidence. But Nora proved them wrong. Her lullaby scratched into diary pages, hidden in tape decks, coded into poetry did what witness statements and surveillance footage often couldn't. They endured. They told a story no one wanted to hear, and they outlived every excuse. 1 year after the verdict, Aisha Khan sat in a conference room full of men who once rolled their eyes at emotional cases. They didn't roll them now. She stood beside a digital whiteboard titled The Nora Protocol, Integrating Personal Expression into Early Abuse Detection. Below it, timelines, case studies, audio samples, and in the center, Nora's face. Not the tragic black and white school photo that ran in the papers. A newer one colorized from old film. Eyes burning with something more than innocence. Defiance. Aisha pointed to a slide labeled linguistic red flags. "These aren't metaphors," she said. "They're patterns. Code words victims use when they're not safe enough to say what's happening outright." She clicked again. "The pipes hum, he sings, with a gun in his throat, if I vanish. Look where the music stops." These lines helped us locate Nora's body. We didn't just read them, we listened. One officer at the table raised his hand. "You're saying we need to start reading poetry in every missing girl's room?" Aisha's reply was surgical. "I'm saying maybe, if you had, she wouldn't have been missing for 20 years. Silence. Then. Applause. The Nora Protocol launched officially 3 months later. Police across the country received new training in creative forensics. How to recognize cries for help inside art, lyrics, even drawings. More than 24 previously dismissed diaries were re-examined. For reopened cases led to new convictions. Teachers and counselors were given tools to decode symbolic trauma in student writing. One officer in Lahore wrote, "It's like we suddenly realized the girls were screaming this whole time, just not in ways we were trained to hear." Javed Haq spent his days at the Nora's Room shelter now. Not as a father looking for redemption, but as a man passing on lessons etched in blood and ink. One afternoon, a 14-year-old girl named Alina handed him a notebook. "It's got some weird stuff in it," she said shyly. "But it's how I think." He read the first page. "My house is a locked song. My windows sing lies. Not, my door squeaks." His name. He looked up, eyes damp. "You want to show this to someone?" She nodded. "Then I'll walk in with you." Samina became a public speaker. Her TEDx talk, "The Friend Who Stayed Silent," went viral. "I thought I was protecting her by saying nothing," she said. "But silence is not protection. It's camouflage for predators." She finished with this. "Nora didn't need us to speak for her. She just needed us to echo her." Ayasa's Final Move, a podcast. Songs from the Cellar. Each episode, a deep into a real case where creative expression cracked it open. Episode 1, The Music Box. Nora's Story. It broke streaming records in the first week. In Episode 2, a guest analyst revealed something spine-chilling. The recovered tape, if you slow it down at the end, you can hear her humming, almost like she knew the recorder was still running. It's a melody we've found in 2 other unrelated missing persons diaries from the 90s. A shared trauma song. Aisha sat in silence for a moment. "Then maybe Nora didn't just leave evidence," she said. "Maybe she left a language." Majid Sadekwa's name faded. he became a footnote, a warning, but Nora, she became a blueprint, not just for justice, but for listening. One cold evening, Javed walked along the riverbank with Saira. The town had installed a small bench near the old pump house. It bore an inscription. She sang, "Anyway, Nora Hack. 1970-1986. Saira sat beside him, holding his hand. "She forgives you," she whispered. He didn't reply, just nodded. Some griefs don't fade, they evolve. In a nearby school, a girl tapped her pencil nervously, unsure how to tell her teacher about the bruises. So she turned her poem in instead. The door clicks twice. The mirror cries when he's near. This time, the teacher recognized it, because Nora had already taught them how to read. There is a kind of silence that grows like rot. It spreads under doors, creeps behind curtains, and settles in the bones of those who've learned that speaking out invites danger. But there's another kind too. The silence just before a song begins, and that's the one the world hears now. A year and a half after Nora Hack's case cracked wide open, the ripple was no longer just local. In Karachi, a missing persons hotline received double the usual calls, not from parents, but from girls themselves. Teenage girls, college students, even 10-year-olds dialing to say, "I don't feel safe at home." They weren't laughed off, they were listened to. Because somewhere in training sessions, notebooks, workshops, someone had taught the world a new phrase. Every girl's silence is a code, and Nora was fluent in it. Javed, Hack, once known only as a grieving father, became a guest speaker at advocacy events. Not because he was some hero, he refused that word, but because he was living proof of what happened when we don't ask the hard questions soon enough. He stood at one school auditorium in front of 500 teenage girls and said, "I raised a girl who told the truth, and I told her she was being dramatic. That will never leave me. So let me tell you this, as a father who learned too late, if you feel fear in your own home, if someone tells you to keep a secret that makes your skin crawl, you are not the problem, they are, and someone will listen now." The girls stood, every one of them. They didn't clap, they sang. Nora's melody, the one that had ended her story, now opening theirs. Aisha Khan's podcast had gone international by its third season. Cases from Mexico, Romania, India, and South Africa flooded in, each one eerily familiar. Girls with notebooks full of metaphors no one had read. Lyrics about shadows, doodles of locked doors. Code words that meant he touches me when no one's home. Aisha began collaborating with linguists and trauma therapists to build what they now called the Nora Lexicon, a searchable tool used by educators and counselors to identify risk patterns in youth writing. It was revolutionary, and it was built from the pages of one diary buried in a wall. Meanwhile, Nora's room shelter expanded to 3 more cities. Samina became its national coordinator. Every time a new girl arrived, nervous and silent, she would hand them the same thing, a blank red notebook. Not because they had to write, but because they could. One girl, age 15, wrote on her first page, "My voice isn't pretty, but it's mine." Samina framed it. On the 2nd anniversary of Nora's death being confirmed, the city finally installed a permanent memorial at the pump house site. It wasn't a statue, not a plaque. It was an interactive listening post, a small bench with headphones. Visitors could sit and listen to parts of Nora's diary read aloud by young actresses, accompanied by subtle music. The recording ended not with her humming, but with a chorus of real girls singing her final lullaby, recovered, rewritten, and reimagined. The final line always left visitors stunned. "They tried to silence me. But you're hearing this, aren't you?" Majid Sadekwi remained a ghost. No one mourned him. No one cared when his gravemarker was stolen or defaced. The world had long since stopped whispering his name. Now they whispered hers. Aisha visited the river one final time. Alone she sat by the listening post, let Nora's words play in her ears, and whispered back, "You weren't just a victim, you were the beginning." That night, a girl in Quetta picked up her guitar. She'd never played outside her bedroom before. She live-streamed for the first time. her voice shaky, her hands sweating. She opened with her own song, but midway, she paused and said, "I want to sing one that's not mine," and then Nora's lullaby. Thousands of girls across the country tuned in. Some sang with her, some cried, some finally told their stories to someone. That song would reach over 2 million views in less than a week, and below it, one comment stood out. She didn't disappear. She multiplied. In the years that followed, the world would forget many cases, but not this one, because Nora's story wasn't just a tragedy, it was a survival manual. For every girl, every teacher, every tired parent, every stubborn cop who used to roll his eyes at drama, Nora taught them all, not by shouting, but by singing softly enough that the right people finally learned how to listen.